Let's now look at the forehand loop against backspin. First thing that's immediately obvious is the length of the swing, which is much longer than what you've seen with the forehand counter hit. Second is the speed of the swing itself is obviously a very, very fast swing, with most of the racket speed being turned into heavy topspin as well as some pace. One thing to note is because I'm using a 1.5mm chopping rubber here, I'm having to swing a little bit more upwards than I would normally have to do if I was using a thicker, more aggressive rubber. I'd be able to swing a little bit more forwards. Going into the slow motion of the shot, first thing to notice is the stance basically the same, still in a forehand stance, although the toes of the right foot really do point out to the side to allow me to put more weight onto that right knee. Racket now goes behind the right knee, probably about 6 inches behind the right knee, and you can see the use of the wrist, really snapping the wrist through the ball, cocking the wrist and then snapping through. Big shoulder turn now, the shoulders become square to the camera. The forward swing started really by the opening, the swinging of the left arm a little bit, which brings the shoulders and waist to start the turn, finished by the movement of the snapping of the forearm, and the wrist snap is the final little addition just before contact. So again, now you can see the racket back behind the knee, closed wrist angle, tilted forward a little bit, finishing up high, above head height, in front of the head, and again, shoulders and waist turning, right toes turned out, racket behind the right knee, racket tilted, swinging now forwards and upwards until just after contact. Naturally the racket then starts to turn and follow the curve of the actual arm swing upwards, but as much through contact as possible the swing is forwards and upwards. Contact being made in front of the body, out to the side, around about the left knee, so not really too far back from the body. The jumping in the air is really just something that I do. It was taught how I was taught, and it's stuck with me through the years, but not something you have to do. And we'll just now look at it from the front view perspective. You'll see there, it's natural because you're talking about a fairly low or lower margin for error. The sort of mistakes you'll tend to see is if you get too thin a contact, you can tend to hit the ball into the net because you don't get enough power, and you'll see the occasional top edges where the ball will go flying high in the air, simply because you're talking about there's a fairly or a much lower margin for error in this shot. Again, you can see the dipping of the right shoulder is a personal trait. A lot of players against backspin just use the bending of the knees and don't dip the right shoulder. But you can see how I really get side on to the opponent, so my shoulders are basically perpendicular to the camera. Even though the swing is fast and quick, the follow through finishes really not much past my head. I don't cross over the midline of my body very much. The playing elbow, the racket elbow, stays below shoulder height, and that's part of the braking mechanism to stop me from over swinging with the racket in front of the head. You can see now how from the side view the racket goes behind the right knee, and you'll see it here, and then part of the forward swing brings it back into the flight path of the ball. So it's behind the right knee, comes into the flight path of the ball, and for as long as possible I try and keep my racket in that flight path before part of the natural curving of the swing around the elbow lifts the racket up and a bit to my left or to the right of the camera. Again, turning of the waist and shoulders, weight goes lower as I bend my knees, push with the left arm and the legs upwards, fast swing, brush contact. So it's a kind of a medium contact of heavy spin, but also a little bit solid as well. Not a pure skim of the ball. A pure skim would give virtually all spin and no speed. Staying balanced though, and again that's another important thing to watch, is that even though it's a big swing, by going onto my right foot and then finishing Square, I stay balanced throughout the stroke.